Let's now finally finish up this logging functionality part. And remember how I said that in this video I wanted to implement a really nice alert for when the user successfully logs in. And so to see that, let's log the user out for now by removing the cookie manually. Let's reload. And so now, of course, the user should no longer be logged in. And indeed, it isn't. And as we already know, that's because the cookie wasn't sent in the request. And so the isLoggedIn middleware that we created in the last video did not put the user object into response.locals. Remember that? And so if it's not there, the user menu will not be rendered. And instead, this part gets rendered so that we now can click here on login. And so that alert that I was talking about before, I wanted to show up here basically at the beginning. And then after a second and a half, we still want to do that reload. So moving to the main homepage. Anyway, let's create some functions for this alert in yet another separate file. So new file, alerts.js. All right. But now, before we can actually move on, we need to think a little bit about our front-end architecture here. Now, this course, of course, is not about the front end, but still, we need to at least care a little bit about it here, because we're really starting to get a nice amount of files here. And including all of them into all our pages is not a good practice. So, such as we've been doing here. So this is not a good practice. We should only have one big JavaScript file which includes all the code. And so in modern JavaScript front-end development, we usually use something called a module bundler. And the most popular one is probably still Webpack, but usually Webpack gives us a lot of problems and it's really a pain to set it up. And so there's actually a very nice new kid on the block, so to say, which is called Parcel. So let's take a look at that, see if it already shows up. And indeed, that's the one. So blazing fast, zero configuration web application bundler. And so that's exactly what we're looking for. Simply a bundler which doesn't require any complex configurations because we don't want to waste any time of that. All right, so let's just go ahead and install it here. So npm install, and I'm not sure if it's just Parcel actually. So let's go back here. Probably that is Parcel.js or something. Because I remember the last time I installed it, it didn't work right away. So let's check that. Yeah, indeed, it is Parcel Bundler. Yeah, we got some error. Oh, okay, so I forgot to save it as a dev dependency. So we actually want it as a safe dev, okay? And that's because it's a development tool. Now, still something went wrong. Let me try it with sudo here. And so if it didn't work in your case as well, then just use sudo in order to get the proper permissions. All right, so let's take a look at our package.json. And indeed, here it is. All right. Now, if you're watching this video sometime after I recorded it, they might already have gone to version number 2. And that, as we already know, might introduce some breaking changes. And so going forward from this point, if you get any errors that you didn't see here in the video, then please go ahead and install this package here using version 1. Okay, so basically add one like this. Okay, and so this then avoids you running into these weird errors, and hopefully it also saves me from tons of negative comments or negative reviews that expect me to update all my videos every other week just because some tool gets updated. And of course, that's not possible. And so many times the easiest solution is simply for you to use the same version as I am using in the video. All right. Anyway, now in order to actually use Parcel, let's add some scripts here. And so I'm adding one to watch or JavaScript. Okay. And for that, I use the parcel watch command. And this would actually already run just fine out of the box, but I still want to configure a little bit because otherwise it's going to put me the final bundle in some folders that I don't want them. And so let's specify which folder it actually should watch. And so that's public/JavaScript and then index.js. So that's our entry point, and that's the file that we're going to create in a second. Okay, and then the output directory should also be into public.js. Okay, and many times you will have different folders for the development and for the output. But in this case, since it's a very simple architecture, I'm going to put the bundle file right in the same place as the development files. All right, let's also specify the output file. And so that should be bundle.js. All right, and so now I can run this and it will then take a look at this file here and see if something changes or in one of the dependencies. And whenever that happens, it will then bundle all of the files together again into this bundle.js file. All right, then let's also duplicate this because we also want a final, let's say, production version. Okay, so this one we are going to run once we're really finished. Okay, so that takes a bit longer, but it also does some bit more optimization stuff. But that, of course, we don't need for development. Development, as always, we just want it to work. So let's do npm run watch.js. But before we do that, let's actually create the index.js. And let's close some of these folders here. It's a bit too confusing like this. So index.js, and let's just do a simple console.log here for now. Hello from Parcel. All right. Then let's also go to our base here, and I will actually now comment out all of these and only include the bundle file. So again, one file which will basically contain all the code that's in all the other files and all their dependencies. So let's give it a save. And now let's actually run this, see what we get there. And indeed, we got our new file, which is bundle.js. And it has all this bunch of code already in there. Okay, simply for this one line of code at this point. But anyway, let's reload our page here. And hello from Parcel. So that worked. And so now let's go ahead and actually set up this file here. So to avoid confusion, let's close these files that we no longer need for what we're doing right now. So that's a lot of stuff. All right, this one neither. And so now the idea is basically that this index.js file is our entry file. And so in this one, we kind of get data from the user interface, and then we delegate actions to some functions coming from these other modules here, basically. So we have now the login module, we have our alerts module, and so just like in Node.js, we can actually now export data from these modules. So let's do that, and what I want to export is this function here. Now, it works a little bit different than it works with Node.js, because Node.js uses something called CommonJS in order to implement modules. I'm not sure if I mentioned that when we first talked about modules, but here in front-end JavaScript, since ES 2015 or ES6, there's something called modules in JavaScript as well. And the syntax is a bit different, but actually the way it works behind the scenes. But actually, if you understand how it works with CommonJS, then this one here will be very similar. So ES6 modules use the export-import syntax. And so here, all we need to do is to say export and then whatever we want to export from this file. And that's really it. Now this piece of code here, we will actually use it in the index file. So remember how I said that this file here is more to really get data from the user interface and then delegate the actions. And so that's exactly what we are doing here. Okay? And so then here, we only have this kind of module which then exports the login function. And then we can import that in here and call login right here in index.js. And that works like this. So import instead of require, then the name of the variable that we want to import. And so I'm using curly braces here. And so it's called login. And then from the name of the file, which in this case, same directory, login. Now let's also disable ESLint here again. And I used these curly braces here, basically because we're doing the export in this way. But there's also something similar to module.export, which is kind of the default export. And so in ES6 modules, it's actually called a default export. And so in that case, we then would not need these curly braces. Okay, so right now we need to do it like this because, well, that's the name of this function that we exported. All right. Now, something really important as well in this login is that we used Axios. And remember how I said that we were going to install it actually from npm as an npm module, right? And so let's do that now. And actually, because we already commented out Axios from here. And so right now, login cannot use Axios, well, because we no longer included it here. And so let's go ahead, open up a new terminal and install Axios into our project. And then now all we need to do is to say import Axios from Axios. And that's it. All right. And so this file, for now at least, is done. But let's now close it because we will still need it very soon. Next up, we should actually also install a polyfill, which will make some of the newer JavaScript features work in older browsers as well. And so let's say npm install, and then this one here looks a bit weird. So it's @babel / polyfill like this. And then up here, we will do import just like this. All right. And so this one here, we do not save it into any variable because that's not necessary at all. All we want this to do is to basically be included into our final bundle to, well, polyfill some of the features of JavaScript. All right. And so that's also why it's here in the first line of these imports. Anyway, let's now import this Mapbox as well. And for that, we actually need to first create a function which is going to do all of this stuff here. Okay, so let's create export display map, which will take in the array of locations. So that will then actually be read in the index.js file. All right. So again, index.js is more for getting data from the user interface, so from the website, and then delegating some actions into these other modules. All right. And so therefore, this stuff here will be done inside of index. Let's do it up here. Then import display map Mapbox. All right. And so let's call that as well with the locations. Now remember way back when we actually created this map. And remember how it asked us if we wanted to use the Mapbox library on NPM. So we could now go ahead and actually use that one instead of this one that we're using right now. So, well, it's not here. Yeah, so this one. So this here is the Mapbox library that we're currently using. But again, there's also an NPM version, and so then we would not need to have this one. However, for some reason, there's a problem with using this library together with Parcel. Okay, so other people actually run into this issue, and so we cannot use the Mapbox NPM library together with Parcel. And so that's the reason why I'm still doing it like this. Okay, so Mapbox is completed with this. This we don't need anymore as well. And now let's actually get rid of some of these errors that we saw down here. Well, now they're no longer here. But for example, we had the problem that this code here created some errors when we were on pages that didn't have this map here, right? Because of course, only the detail page has this map, so this element, but then this code of course runs on all the other pages and will then create errors there. And so let's fix that. And so what I'm doing here is first to create an element with this and then test if it actually exists before we execute this line of code. So we will create some DOM elements here. And here let's say delegation. So if Mapbox, and only then do these two actions here. Okay, here it's also then Mapbox, and that's much nicer. Here let's also put values, and I'm going to put these two because actually we might need them, or actually we will need them for other stuff as well. And so this way it's a bit cleaner. Let's also only add this event listener here if this element exists, right? Because, well, again, it will create an error if it doesn't. So login form. And so if, and then let's reuse it here, give it a save. And so now that looks better. Okay, let's actually close this terminal. And this here should have kept bundling our code together each time there's a save. Let's just save it here again. Okay, so I hope that changed now. And so let's go ahead and try that out. And so if we can still log in at this point, well, then that means that it did actually work. Well, maybe not. Let's try that again here. All right, so there's something wrong going on here. And so as always, let's log this email and password to the console here. I mean, because we already know that actually this function here is called, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't even get the error. Right? Because that error is clearly coming from our API. And so all of what we have here is actually working, I believe. And let's take a look at the console. So it appears that there are actually no username and password. Okay. I'm not sure why that is. So let's take a look if actually we do get something. So login, and I will also log these right here. No, not here, but here. And so apparently the problem must be that username and password are not really defined. Oh, and now of course I can see why that is. What a stupid mistake. So we're trying to read these values here right in the beginning when the page loads. And of course, at this point, these values are not defined. And so we of course can only define them right here in our event listener, right? So by the time this function here is called, well, then of course email and password are set, and so then it's the time where we can read them. So that was kind of stupid. But, you know, sometimes that kind of stuff happens. And now let's actually copy this here. This time we are logged in successfully, meaning that our code here still works. Great. And so now let's do the final part that we wanted to do in this lecture, which is actually creating these alerts. All right. So let's create a function called showAlert and export that. And so then in login, we will import this function and use it there. So show alert, and this as an input will get a type and a message. So just like this. And this type is either success or error. Okay, because depending on this input, we will then have different CSS for each of these alerts. And you will see that in a second. So what we're going to do is to basically create some HTML markup here and then insert that into our HTML. So something really easy. So markup and a template string and now some nice HTML. So it's simply a div with a class of alert and then alert dash dash, so a modifier with our type. Okay, and so that's why it needs to be either success or error. So let me quickly show that in CSS, because I think it's really important to really know how all of this plays together. Okay, and so here we have our alert class and then alert success and alert error. All right, as always, let's disable ESLint here. Okay, and get rid of this. And now, of course, here then goes the message that we pass into this function. And of course, we could then go ahead and use this all over our application, but in this case, we only need it actually here for our login. So document.querySelector. And so now here we select the element where we want to include this HTML that we just created. And so that's actually right at the beginning of the body element. So right at the top of the page. So body, and then insert adjacent HTML. So this one here. And if you took my complete JavaScript course, then all of this here will be nothing new to you. Okay, so here we can specify a couple of keywords, and in this case we want after begin. And so basically what this means is inside of the body, but right at the beginning. All right, and then the HTML, so the markup that we actually want to include. Great, so this is going to create a very simple alert based on type and message. But now we actually also want a function for hiding alerts. So let's create it here as well. Export, and probably we don't even need it outside of here. But still, for reusability, it's always a good idea to export all of this. This one doesn't need to take in any argument. So now all we're going to do is to select the element with the alert class, and then after that remove it. So query selector alert. So exactly the same class name as here. And then we need to use a JavaScript trick where we need to move one level up to the parent element and then from there remove a child element. So if there is an element, then element dot parent element dot remove child, and then the element. Okay. So again, that should just be a basic JavaScript or basic DOM manipulation. And so since this is a Node course, I'm not going to go deep into that. Anyway, what I want to do here now is to, whenever we show an alert, first hide all the alerts that already exist. So we always, just to make sure, always run hide alert. And then finally, I also always want to hide all the alerts after 5 seconds. So window, set timeout, hide alert after 5 seconds. All right, and now let's import that here. Display alert, it was called, right? Oh, show alert with type and message. So show alert from, right from that. And so, yeah, so we want to use that right in this place. So instead of the JavaScript alert, we want to do show alert. All right, and here the same. We still need to specify the type here. And so that's success in this case. And here it is error. Weird auto-completion. Okay, that's better. So let's test that out. And first of all, we need to log out by deleting this cookie. Reload, log in. And now I'm testing it first with a wrong password. And here we go. So incorrect email or password right in our nice alert. And you saw that after 5 seconds, it disappeared. And of course, we could have put some nice animation there and everything. But I think like this, it's already more than enough. So let's see that again just quickly. And so that's what it's going to look like. But when it's correct, then of course, it should be green. So yeah, logged in successfully. And we see our reload after 1.5 seconds. And so now it really is working. That's our complete authentication on the front end. That was a lot of work, but if you ask me, totally worth it. Now the only thing that's missing is us actually logging out when we click this button here. So right now that's not the case, and so in the next video, let's fix that.